Hi guys, welcome to the UAP Files. This is going to be a special, unusual, unique episode of the UAP Files podcast. This is an end of season roundup, and we're going to be going through all of the episodes. I think it's 27 episodes, 28 episodes, 28 episodes over this last year. And we're going to be covering those, having a bit of a chat about those, and then there's going to be a bit of a Q&A at the end. So I've got Tom with me, who's co-hosting this with me. Say hello, Tom.
Hello.
How are we
Very
doing?
excited to be here. Awesome, man.
So just to introduce Tom, Tom Vernon is worked with me loads, helped me out loads, and has just been a good friend over since I kind of started this and we started talking. And how would you characterize how we kind of were introduced or met each other? How would you sort of characterize that, Tom?
I would say I'd almost say it's a little bit weird. It's like one of those what's that term for when things just work out at the same time? But yeah, I can't really put my finger on it. I just noticed your Instagram page, and it was different. It had a point of difference from most of the other stuff out there, and I really resonated with it. And I just, without trying to get teachers' attention, commented and stuff like that. We obviously were similar age and we've got similar music taste. I think we just struck up a bit of a rapport and went from there, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And it's probably worth mentioning that you wrote a song or a track for one of the videos, and I remember seeing your account, your music, and I was like, oh, that would, maybe we could have that would be cool having a tune, and it worked out really well. It was awesome, a real cool clip.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I loved it. It was I never thought I would be doing something like that, so it's great fun to do that. Yeah, I'm really happy to contribute in that way.
Awesome, thanks again, man. Okay, so what we'll probably do is we'll have some comments. So over the last few days, I've asked people that follow the account to chuck in any questions, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A at the end. And I know that you've got some questions. I've got a couple of questions for you as well, Tom. But if it's okay, we'll jump straight into to the episode. So the first episode was Dr. Keith Taylor, and it was my very first episode. And I contacted him, and I'd seen him on Twitter, on X, commented on a few UAP related things. I had this account and thought, you know what, I'm gonna do this podcasting. I'm gonna talk to people. I'm gonna see what people's take is and have that. I would have no other opportunity to speak to these people had it not been for this account. It got quite popular, and I thought I'm going to use this opportunity and see if someone will take a risk and talk to this random person and do their very first ever podcast when they don't have any point of reference to go, well, I'll have a quick YouTube and see what their previous one was like. But I didn't have that, and Keith Taylor was incredible, accepted it, and he was really good. And it was such a short episode because I had a few questions and I was just focused on asking those questions. And then once those questions were over, I was like, my brain went blank. I was like, well, thanks so much. See you later. And it was like like a 6-minute podcast or something like that. But I learned quite a lot from that first one. And I think the second one with Jamal we'll come on to that in a minute, but it was very different. But, bless him, he came back on a second time and it was, much better. But yeah, that was all me. Such a nice guy. What did you?
He's such a great guy. Yeah. I mean, the thing about him in particular that really jumped out was he's one of those guys that's intelligent enough to be very humble with his opinions.
Yeah.
He did not come out here and go, it's reptilians from blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? And like it's this. He's very humble, very reserved, only spoke about what he knew. And it was really interesting to me that he was inspired by James Fox's The Phenomenon. And like it shows the plethora of people that are being pulled in by that kind of content.
Yeah, and such a fascinating background because he's gone from being a sort of a New York City cop. He was on the organized crime squad, and then he was in education, became a doctor. Just such a broad. And when I was researching him, there's so many different, but it's such different fields and subjects, and it's not just like staying in law enforcement, moving into a different sort of area of law enforcement or education. It was just such a different mix of things, which is fascinating. He's clearly trying to learn as much as he can about us and the universe. And I guess this is, the perfect subject to move into, because
Yeah,
it's, one of the biggest unknowns. What do you think about Jamel Howard then? The
I thought he was really open and positive. And it's cool seeing somebody that's in that kind of industry, because he's an actor, isn't he?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and again, like, it was amazing to hear him talk about the Dogon tribe and the connection to Sirius and ancient Sumer and whatnot. So it was just such a cool opportunity to see somebody else with an
yeah.
interest in the same field as us from that world, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when he turned up he was wearing like a NASA top, and I've got a very
Yeah.
similar NASA t-shirt. I was almost going to wear mine. I thought, no, I just go with my plain white podcasting t-shirt. And
It's
he
very
turned up
Joe
in that. I
Rogan
thought
of you.
it would have been great if we'd have both turned up in, dude, NASA, nice. But yeah, very cool guy. No, I know he's writing a script now, which is kind
Yeah.
of ET related. And it's quite kind of interesting that kind of fascination kind of continues into, from a younger age into adult life and
Mm.
into his profession, and creativity, writing a script about it. And
Yeah.
that's an ongoing theme. I think we'll probably talk about later with other guests.
Mm.
But I found that kind of fascinating. But really, I was fairly starstruck, because I'd gone from never doing a podcast, never really talking to anyone, even semi famous in my
Yeah.
entire life, to going to, I've seen this guy on, on Power. It's like one of my favorite programs.
Yeah.
I've seen him. I know the character. I've seen him in, several of the shows that he's been on. So it was, but super down to earth guy.
Mm.
Really
Yeah.
cool.
Great guy.
Yeah. So Roger Ver, Bitcoin Jesus. I don't know. I
Yeah.
googled his name, and it's just Bitcoin Jesus came up, and I think the first ever investor in
He really smashed
Bitcoin.
it at the right time, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I
and
just thought, I mean, the main thing that stands out about him is, without being all, oh, you're wonderful, like, he's a face that you would not see on
mm,
I don't want to say mainstream, on a big successful UAP channel. So, and he's a man that obviously spots potential and knows when to hedge his bets, essentially. So it was fascinating to hear somebody with such an analytical mindset talk about such a nebulous subject. What
yeah,
did you think?
yeah. I was surprised. I was intrigued, and I just found him a really nice guy, really interesting take. I mean, he was kind of on the fence. He
Yeah.
didn't want to kind of have a position either way, but it was, it was interesting to see, because he's, as you say, he's clearly looking ahead. He's very analytical in the way that he
Mm.
kind of assesses things, and so to kind of see what we're seeing, I guess,
Hmm.
and think that there's some, there probably is something there. Um, Really interested me, and just a totally different, different kind of world to the world that I'm in,
Yeah.
with his life and finance and stuff. But yeah, just a real cool guy. I enjoyed that conversation with him, and interesting that he had comments about abductions and things. And, if some of this stuff turns out to be correct, and abductions are part of that, that's a massive thing. Hang on a minute, it's not just there's the
Yeah.
odd thing that we can't understand. It's actually abducting people, and it's difficult for a lot of people to even if they believe in the UFO stuff, to not believe in the abduction
Absolutely.
stuff. It's a big
I
leap.
think, as far as disclosure goes, that's the brick wall that's
Mm.
going to have to get smashed at some point, because it's okay saying we've got this fancy spaceship, but when you start saying, and they use it against us occasionally, that's a bit of a weirder conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Lewis Hertham,
Yeah.
um, really, really cool guy. I really enjoyed talking to him. So down to earth, and again, another one of those real starstruck, because I'd seen him. I just thought he's such a fascinating character.
Yeah.
Seen him on TV, on loads of shows, and
Mm.
in film. But for him to have an experience himself, and it was an incredible experience. I
Yeah.
think described it as like almost like a pool ball just bouncing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought that was a great way to describe it. A
Yeah,
proper orb sighting in the 70s as well. So, kind of before the orbs seem to be a very modern phenomena, don't they?
yeah,
So, he's one of those guys, and this probably sounds a bit weird, when you just see people and you're like, I think we'd get on.
yeah,
he's just such an open, sort of likable guy that it's deceptive that he's from this high up world and he's an actor and super cool and all that. But you're just like, yeah, you're a good human. I like you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was interesting that he kind of saw that there was this kind of threat narrative, and that there might be some people out there that might want you to think that this is, a
Yeah,
threat to us and a danger to us, and
yeah,
he said, I don't think that's true, and I don't think we should pay too much
yeah,
attention to that. I
yeah.
found that interesting.
Yeah, my favorite thing that he said in that episode, funnily enough, was just kind of a little thread where a friend of his was looking at Flight Radar 24 about his sighting to see if it was a normal explanation. And they said that on there it was a Cessna. So that to me is a big chin stroking moment. Like, yeah, could it be some of our military tech that's got a different transponder identity? You know what I mean? There's
Yeah,
definitely a little rabbit hole there worth exploring.
yeah, yeah. That was interesting. Yeah.
Mm,
So Patrick Welby Everard, he's a good friend of mine. I mean, I've known him for many, many years, and he's obviously an author. We talked about kind of his experience. He'd say he'd experienced something when he was younger, and I think over a field, a craft,
yeah.
and I think that kind of piqued his interest going forward. And yeah, real cool guy. And I talked to him years and years before things really kind of kicked off in the media. And
Hmm.
we'd kind of always kept in contact. And every now and again, when we saw each other, we'd have a bit of a catch up and talk about things. And then, when the stuff kind of kicked off in the last year or two with the Pentagon and Arrow and Congress and Grush and what have
Yeah.
you, really reignited it. So, well, let's do a podcast. And
Mm.
so that was cool. Yeah, I
Yeah,
enjoyed
and
that.
a landed sighting as well. Like you,
Mm,
that's a rarity.
yeah,
Not that we compare them or anything like that, but that's unusual. Just like the Rendlesham kind of take on things
yeah,
of seeing it sort of silhouetted against the night light and whatnot. Yeah,
mm,
really good.
yeah. Okay, so Adam Simon, what are your thoughts on Adam Simon?
I absolutely loved Adam Simon. I think I've followed like immediately followed him on Instagram. Um, I like a guy that speaks his mind. I know some of the stuff was quite spicy,
Mm,
um, but at the end of the day, that's his take, and he's got a behind the curtain on that particular take. So I'm not going to knock him for that. I'm not going to immediately agree with everything that he said, but it's important that people are saying things like that and pulling people up where they are. Plus, he lived by an airbase.
mm,
So he had a slight behind the thing. I mean, another fantastic part of his interview is when he was talking to the guys working at Lockheed and whatnot, saying like, "Oh my god, I saw this thing in the sky last night," and then his contact was saying, "Oh, we might have been doing something, don't worry about that. We can probably explain it." So yeah, really, really interesting guy. I could listen to him for ages. I also love how he because like it is a frustration when we're dealing with the stigma. Some of the media content out there is a little bit fanciful, and you get the keyboard music and the
yeah.
CGI aliens and stuff, and you kind of like, oh god, how can I tell my normal friends about this now? And for him to just pull a pin, throw a hand grenade at that entire side of the media, I just thought was hilarious. So yeah,
Yeah.
top guy.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely no filter, which is, brilliant. It's, I'm sat there
Radical,
and
radical honesty. Yeah.
yeah, and it was unique, and I, really
Mm.
enjoyed it. He's one of those guys that I could sit there and, have a beer with him and talk for
Yeah,
hours and hours and hours, and
absolutely.
great guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Plus his very interesting point about the military patent for a spherical metallic looking drone. I
Mm,
mean, you've got Mosul Orb, that thing that pinged past Joe Biden's Air Force One on the news
yeah.
earlier this week. That seems to be something that's all around the world at the moment, is spotting these little cylinders and stuff. So very interesting. If there's a patent there somewhere, we can immediately kind of sweep those to the half explained side.
Yeah, definitely. And he was a very kind, sweet guy
Mm,
so when I obviously a complete amateur in the podcasting world, and I still am, but this was, major amateur stuff. So I'd had I'd had the basic level Zoom for for the podcasting, recording, and audio and video. And I'm getting up to kind of the 40-minute mark, and I didn't realize that when you're on the free version of Zoom, after 40 minutes it just cuts off,
Clang.
and that's it, done. And as I'm getting to the sort of 40-minute mark, I think at that point I must have realized I'd seen somewhere that it's got like a 40-minute timer,
Yeah.
and then it stops. And I'd had a load of questions. I hadn't kind of, things I wanted to talk about. He was mid flow, and I had, hadn't I wanted to have kind of an ending as well. And so it just cut out. And I'd, yeah, I died a little bit inside, I'll
It's
be
just, okay,
honest.
thanks, bye.
Yeah. And so a mad kind of dash to try and speak to him afterwards, and he was he was so cool about it. It's like, yeah man, I'll whack on the same t-shirt and we'll do it all again. But so yeah, we
Yeah, and then you got gold with the part two as well. So
yeah,
win really.
yeah, it was a really cool guy. I really appreciate his time. And this is the kind of guy that he's got films on Netflix, and he's super in demand. So to put aside a couple of hours with me essentially over the two podcasts
Mm,
is really cool of him. But yeah, real interesting. I mean, he was adamant, they are coming from the water,
mm.
So yeah, that was an
Yeah,
interesting one.
yeah, massive points. I think the USO thing, there's only really uh Richard Dolan
Mm,
that brings up the USO side of things regularly anyway. I think it's a very, but again, I think that's one of the things that's potentially quite scary for the general public to think
yeah,
about. So it's probably why they're leaving it on the back burner for now. But yeah, really interesting. A really
yeah,
interesting opinion.
yeah. Wesley Gear, you've seen him, haven't you? You've seen him play live?
I have been in one of his mosh pits in my considerably wilder youth. Yeah, he was with Head PE playing at Ozfest, and he absolutely stormed it. So yeah, I was that was another big wow when I saw that he'd got him on. But I mean, overshadowing that is the amazing stuff that he's doing with Rock to Recovery and all his good work there. So he's another cool human.
Yeah, and great to see the the experience, and to get that from from somebody real kind of mainstream person. People know him,
Mm,
famous guy, and he's had this experience. He's seen this thing that's hard to explain conventionally.
yeah.
Um, I think he described it as a sort of similar, in fact, to Lewis Eartham, wasn't it? Like a shooting across a.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. He said it moved like a pool ball,
Mm,
and demonstrated when I saw his interview, it demonstrated three of the observables that Lou Elizondo talks about. So immediate acceleration, immediate deceleration, and then it moved at a right angle. So
mm,
the G forces involved would mean that there wasn't a human inside it.
yeah.
So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, and witnessed it with a friend. Was it a bandmate? I think he said, didn't he?
It was a singer from
Singer.
Head PE. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's
So
been in Slipknot as well. So legend.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, I love it. I got to have a good play with music actually. When I was thinking, right, I'm gonna research me, and I didn't do any research really. I was just listening to music.
Just went
And it
down a
took me back to
massive,
my
yeah.
youth.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so Paola Harris.
Mm.
I have a story on Paola Harris. So it was a prime example of me being an absolute amateur still, which I still am. Um, and and so I'd got the time zones wrong. We'd agreed to have an interview at a certain time, and here's me. So I'm dyslexic. I haven't probably not mentioned that before. So I have to be really careful with times and dates, and writing things
Yeah.
down. And when you're looking at times and dates, and then you're looking at different times and dates in a different country, and you're trying to do maths to figure out what time you're starting.
Yeah.
So long story short, it was like an hour later that I thought the podcast was. So we'll call it a technical issue. And she sat there waiting for like 20 minutes for me, and I'm late. And just, she could have just gone, whatever, don't know who this guy is. I'm not going to bother with him. He's
Yeah.
late. But she didn't. She waited, and I got on, and messaged me, and I saw the message. Oh shit! So I went back and jumped on, and massive apology, and she proper scolded me. But it was like a, in a parental kind of a way, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and we carried on. She was lovely, such a nice person. But
Mm.
I needed that. I needed that to kind of register with, okay, this is not going to happen again,
We
because I
all need to
felt
kick up the bum every now and then, mate, don't we?
exactly. But she was real fascinating lady, and super just ufology, um
Literal
royalty
royalty, isn't she? Yeah.
royalty. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. co-authored a book with Jack Valet, and she's rubbed shoulders with all of the greats,
Yeah.
from decades ago, and she's still in it.
Mm. Yeah, it
Um,
really stood out, the kind of difference in approach of kind of the old school UFO hunter mentality. I've got a really good friend in Spain who has a briefcase and it's all printed out, MJ12 documents, and it's fantastic. It's an
yeah,
absolute treasure trove. Whereas the modern thing is we look for everything online or with
mm,
with AV or through podcasts and things like that. So it's really interesting to see that trade-off
yeah,
between two people with the same intent and a different methodology.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you could kind of sense from her that there was a slight bit of sort of frustration that the kind of current generation isn't. There's so much information out there, but a lot of it
Yeah,
is in books. And I think she's
yeah,
kind of her mindset is, look, there's a lot out there. Go and read it. Why aren't you reading it? And
yeah. I think the only thing I would defend the younger generation in a way is like at that time you had libraries and they had
mm,
fantastic UFO books and you had mailing lists and stuff like that. Whereas now we only find out about these absolutely legendary books
mm,
by seeing somebody talk about it on a podcast.
yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of both. We're both looking at the same thing just from a different side. But she's absolutely right. I mean, some of the stuff in books out there is phenomenal. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So Melissa Tittle. What were your thoughts on Melissa then?
I thought she was awesome.
Hmm.
She's got that kind of eagle persona where she sees straight through, she gets to the facts. It did interest me that some of the media on some of the networks and whatever that she's been associated with go for a bit more of the cinematic approach and the fanciful stuff, whereas she was just like bang. I saw the Peruvian mummies, and frankly thought that they were absolute nonsense. But there was an older one not shown called Maria, and that was really convincing. So I was like, wow, this is so refreshing, and I would love to see more content from her in that
Mm.
in that vein.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I thought exactly the same. I thought she was just a true professional. You can see why she's so successful and why
Mm,
she's snapped up by TV shows. And she's got her own
mm,
production company. She does her own stuff. And I hope to see more of her. And I think she's just such a friendly person, such an easy person to get on with. And when you're talking about a subject that she's passionate about, clearly passionate about it, and it's just as you say, she can cut through it. She's clearly got her own opinions and perspective on things, and I guess that
mm,
doesn't always come out in the shows that she's in because
mm.
they're very much scripted, aren't they? And this is where
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
going to go, and then we're going to show a clip of this, and so it was really interesting to see her and her opinion as opposed to the opinion of the History Channel or whatever,
Hmm.
or the writers of the show. So that was great, and I'd hopefully we'll speak again in the future actually, and perhaps do
Mm.
another podcast next year. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, she's
Um,
definitely one to watch.
yeah, absolutely. So Nick Pope, Nick Pope.
Yeah,
Let's talk about Nick Pope.
yeah.
So I'd spoken to Nick Pope probably several months before the podcast came on. I'd contacted him. Had a couple of questions about some FOIA stuff. I wanted to know about some of the military bases, the civil nuclear constabulary, and if there
Hmm.
are any sightings over, this connection to nuclear. Um, and so I messaged him about that, and he got back to me. He sent me like loads of links and stuff, and I was thinking this guy's like super super huge in this subject, and
Yeah,
he's kind of spending time finding links, sending me links, and he's popping up on podcasts everywhere and news shows, and
yeah,
he's a
yeah.
really really nice guy, really friendly, always got back
Mm.
to me, very prompt. So I was really impressed with that, and you can kind of see why he's had such a long career in the subject because
Yeah.
he's just he's concise, he knows what he's going to say, he's very professional, he's very polite.
And
I
he's
did.
very adaptable as well. Like it doesn't matter what show he's on, he fits
Yes,
whatever
yeah,
niche that show is.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, I found that fascinating when you see him online. He could be there talking to, I don't know, Mick West or Stephen Greenstreet or something.
mm,
And it would appear that he fits into the debunkers,
yeah,
But
Yeah,
then
yeah,
equally,
yeah.
you'll see him on, Ancient Aliens or History
Ancient
Channel,
Aliens.
and he fits in with the, True Believers. It's very
Yeah,
strange to have
he's
somebody
he's
that's both.
he's a very political guy. I
Mm.
mean, that can be quite a diversive thing. Obviously, I mean, Gary Heseltine, another one of your guests, had a few things to say about him that were a little bit spicy.
Mm.
But yeah, he's been there. He's walked the walk. I mean, he had the Calvine photograph pinned up behind his desk at the RAF, so you can't say that the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You know?
Definitely. He's interestingly, he's the highest viewed on Spotify, the podcast with Nick Pope. It was Adam Simon, and then it got
Yeah,
overtaken by Nick Pope. But yeah, so he's clearly a very interesting,
yeah,
watchable, viewed guy.
a public
Um,
face. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. Okay, Anna Lynn McCord.
Hmm.
Anna Lynn McCord. So a few people have messaged me like, how did you get Anna Lynn McCord to come and talk to you? Because she's, movie star and,
Yeah.
super, super famous. But, and for me, she'd liked a few things basically on the account. And that's generally how, for those people listening that don't know, I, generally speaking, the only reason that I know that these people have an interest in UFOs is because they like something to do with UFOs on the account. So therefore, I know they like or have some interest in UFOs. So same with Anna Lynn. She'd liked a few things, and I said, oh, okay, she's interested in the subject. So I messaged her and said, hi, I see you interested. Would you talk to me? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, that's how that kind of came about. And we
Mm,
talked, and I didn't realize that she had, these kind of experiences, and she
mm.
was very open, super open to talking about it, and just a real, wears her heart on her sleeve, and she'll tell you what she's thinking.
Yeah, yeah. Again, radical honesty.
Mm,
I mean, I will admit it took me 3 cups of tea to get through that entire episode because she's just a machine gun of like
yeah.
positivity. I mean, God, I wish I had her energy. She's like a fired up puppy dog. It was fantastic. But what impressed me the most about her is how honest she is about the still really stigmatized side, which is the spiritual side.
Mm,
I mean, that is a side where, from my kind of background, I've been involved with as well, which we'll get into. But I've experienced how difficult that side is to bring up to people. And she was just like, "Yep, bam! I did an out of body experience. I met these people. I saw auras, and bam, bam, bam." And she just radical honesty, and that's exactly what you need to smash the stigma. So as much as you can go, oh my God, how, that's too much to
mm.
process. Like, it's so refreshing to have somebody just go, this is my experience, think what you like.
Yeah,
I really respect her
absolutely.
for that.
Yeah, completely. And I was surprised. I was like, wow, this is, it's incredible.
Yeah,
It's one of those where you sort of sit back and you go, but you're trying to process it in your head because you're thinking you're a public figure, very famous, and clearly
yeah,
yourself is your brand. And so
yeah,
for, future projects, films, and what have you, you'd think that you'd have to be really careful about and scripted almost. And she was just like, this is what I feel, this is what I
yeah,
know, this
boom.
is what's happened to me, and I don't care. I'm just going to say, and it
Yeah,
really impressed me, and I was,
yeah, yeah.
fascinated by that. And
But you've got it's such an unusual topic that affects everybody on the planet, isn't it? I mean, I
mm,
know you've got some people, whether you want me to mention them or not, on the podcast, some very famous actors on there. But we all have a doom scroll at the end of the day, don't we?
mm,
Last thing at night, and it doesn't matter what your job is; it's something that resonates with all of us in different ways. So yeah,
yeah,
really cool.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. So, Tim Ventura. Let's talk about Tim. What
Hmm.
did you think of Tim? So, he's a massive YouTuber, isn't he? And he's got his own. He's online. He's got lots of um, big social media presence. It's
Yeah,
true. I just thought. I mean, he was a true professional. And I'd seen some of his stuff before, so he's a podcaster, and I'd
yeah,
watched his introductions. He's got like massive, long 2-3 minute
yeah,
introductions, and he's very thorough. And
yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm not as thorough, I'm not. We're different kind of people,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that kind
he's
of
one of those
imposter
guys.
syndrome stuff.
I know what you mean. Yeah. So when I've bumped into people that remind me of him before, they've been described as an operator. Like
Mm,
they're the people that just get it done, and
yeah,
you don't see the crinkles in the carpet. It's just smooth. He's a smooth operator. Um, there, there's a reason why he's one of the more popular YouTube hosts. He lives and breathes it. You can tell he's completely given to the professional side. So yeah, he's just a legend. It was really good to hear his account.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was an interesting way that we kind of had contact was without sort of giving too much away in the process, because I don't want to, it's sort of in confidence, a lot of it. But I'd
Yeah,
contacted Mark Sokol, who we'll come to in a bit. But
yeah.
he was through contacting him. I then had contact with Tim, and
Ah,
it kind of just all happened in one. So, well, let's podcast with both of you guys because you're both really fascinating people, and
mm,
Tim was really cool, really
mm,
open to doing it, and was just a true professional, real nice guy. I really enjoyed it.
yeah,
I did find that he was slightly sort of on the fence. I know that some people are kind of really interested in the subject, but kind of don't really want to necessarily give away a position, put all your eggs in one basket, and say this is what I think. Which
yeah.
it's the same for a lot of people, and I'm probably the same as well, generally speaking. But I was kind of hoping for this is what I think, and I get that with every guest. I'm
Yeah,
kind of hoping to get something from them that this is
yeah, yeah,
it's interdimensional. That's definitely what it is, and this is
yeah,
why.
yeah. The Chris Lato
Yeah,
effect kind of thing.
yeah,
But one thing I really did respect about his interview, though, was the way he described his ontological shock moment. He called it his
mm,
come to Jesus moment, where all of a sudden you realize we're not in Kansas anymore, and that is my favorite thing to hear anybody talk about in an interview, because whatever walk of life you are, it's such a personal thing to have to go through. So that was really, really interesting to hear, because it cracks that kind of super slick, no problems
yeah,
persona that he's got when you see behind the curtain a little bit for the personal journey that he went through. So yeah, it's really cool.
yeah. Okay, Gary Hesseltine. Let's talk about Gary Hesseltine. What's I mean, again, kind of old school ufology royalty. What are your thoughts on Gary?
I first saw Gary. Um, I can't remember whose podcast it was, to be honest, but he's written a new book and he's done a massive re-inspection of Rendlesham. And he's got an accent which sounds really local to me. So I kind of profiled him, and he's just got this anvil personality. Like everything is so locked down with fact, 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 that anything that doesn't kind of fit will just bounce off.
Yeah,
So I really respect that. I mean, it's kind of like if Inspector Morse got into UFOs, like that. That's the kind of approach that he's got. I know he talks like a machine gun, but like that's just part of. He is just an unstoppable force in
yeah.
whatever he's got his attention on. So I think he's a really powerful guy to have in this field.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And a fascinating character. And I was kind of pondering whether or not to kind of raise mention
I
mention
think you
this.
should.
You think I
I
should?
think
Yeah,
you should.
I know you do. So people won't know. So I've got a Twitter account, an X account as well, which is UAP Files Podcast. And I hadn't communicated with Gary previously ever before, and so I contacted him, I think via email. So let's do a podcast, and he agreed, and that was great. And we did the podcast. Real cool guy, really
Mm,
super informative, great podcast. And I'd finished and I'd edited it and kind of posted it, and I wanted to send him the link. And I sent him a link on I think on email. So, he had access
yeah.
to the Spotify and the YouTube links. And didn't get anything back from him. I thought that's strange. And then put something on Twitter, just a bit of a, couple minute kind of thing, and tried to look for him on Twitter. I thought he must have an X account somewhere. So I found him, and it
Mm.
said blocked. So
No,
it's
no.
it's yeah, he said it. I was blocked. So I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't think I've ever communicated with him before, but
I don't think it's a you thing, and I'm not saying it's a. I don't think it's an intentional thing, because like I literally at the end of the interview, he's saying like, yeah, let's keep in touch. There's loads coming out. It'd be good to talk again, and he was smiling and happy. So he's either the best actor in the world, or I think there's been a technical hitch there somewhere. But
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've left me thinking, oh, Gary, I hope I haven't offended you. I thought it went really well. I don't think we've ever talked before, but maybe it's, maybe I'm reading too much into it. It's one of those things where
Yeah,
you, or
I've
maybe I'm
lost
just,
plenty of emails in my spam folder
yeah,
before now, like to see that there could be an opportunity for that to have happened. I don't
yeah.
know.
Or equally, maybe I'm just really annoying on Twitter,
Yeah, maybe he just can't stand you, mate. Yeah.
It could be that. I mean, it's highly possible. I'm sure I know plenty of
Yeah.
people. Okay, Mark Sokol from Falcon Space.
Yeah.
So he was. This is how it. I'll set this one up. So I'm looking for content as I always do. Put stuff on Instagram and things that are interesting, stuff that's in the news, stuff that's in, on Twitter, stuff that people are talking about. Do a bit of research, see what's interesting, whack it up. And there was a
Mm.
newspaper story. I think it was. I want to say the Daily Mail, which was the
Hmm.
FBI raid this space lab looking for uranium being used to make flying saucers. I was like, that's a brilliant story. So
Yes.
so I kind of put this thing up and people were really interested in it. And then there was a video that came out afterwards of the FBI walking in and talking to people. And I saw the name on there, Mark Sokol. So I did a bit of research, thought I found him. I'll send him a
Mm.
message. Do you want to come on the podcast? And he was like, yeah, man, I'll come on. So I thought, brilliant. I'll learn all about this spaceship that you're back engineering or reverse engineering and the
Mm.
FBI turning up, trying to see what's happening. So he was an interesting one. I mean, real kind of mad scientist kind of character, reminded me
Yeah.
of Doc Martin from Back to the Future. Doc
Doc
Brown? Doc
Brown.
Brown, Doc
Yeah.
Brown, that's it. Doc Brown. Yeah, that
He's
kind
probably
of,
wearing Doc Martens.
yeah, yeah. Doc Brown. I mean, it's the modern day Doc Brown, isn't it? Just reverse engineering a
If
flying
ever a
saucer.
man needed life insurance, I think with the people that have come up with water powered cars somehow disappearing or
Yeah,
shooting themselves 8 times in the back, yeah,
yeah,
what a legend though. He's if there is a man to watch, it's definitely him because that's the best way to get disclosure. If they just go, yeah, cool, I built one, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we've just made one. We've got one back
Yeah,
here, and
yeah. Don't
yeah.
worry about it. Come have a look. Yeah.
I think if anyone's going to
Interestingly,
do it,
though,
it's him. If anyone's going to
yeah,
do it,
it's
mm,
gonna come. It's gonna come. I find it really interesting the way he. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but he said that the FBI guys were like really friendly and like, oh, I might just pop back and maybe have a couple of questions,
mm,
get to understand it. Because I watched an interview with Grant Cameron, and his theory is that back engineering is going terribly. Like he's like, they've got all the toys, but they don't know how to use them.
yeah,
So he said that they're reaching out to experiences like Chris Bledsoe, for example, because these people can interact with the phenomenon and they're almost jealous of that. So they're being really nice to these people in order to
mm,
push their own thing forward. So
yeah,
we always see the government and this kind of thing as imagining it's all RGB light everywhere and everybody's absolutely got it nailed. But I would imagine it's probably a lot more like you're seeing on the Project Gravatar stuff. It's all
mm,
MDF tables and
yeah.
clip files everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it must be super difficult to kind of employ new people, and that's the thing, isn't it? When you've got something that's so secretive and so
Yeah,
compartmentalized, to then just go, well, right, okay, so we need 30 scientists, 30
yeah,
physicists,
yeah,
30 engineers. Where are we going to get
yeah.
them from?
Absolutely. That's such
Yeah,
a massive point because there's a lot of people saying that the actual people doing this research, I mean, just look at Roswell. Everybody involved is passed away.
mm,
Um, and the people that have been working on the project are retiring by the day. And how do you get somebody in? Because you can't say, do you want to come and work on a flying saucer?
yeah,
You've got to be like, would you be interested in a propulsion project that I can't tell you anything about and you can't tell anybody about? Most people are just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater in that respect.
mm,
So they need a way to recruit the best minds out there because they're in the public field. They're not the super cleared people because if you've committed any misdemeanor, you can't have a security clearance. So
yeah.
there must be a real recruitment drought going on behind the scenes, I'd imagine.
Yeah, yeah, you'd think so. I found it interesting that the story from the FBI was that they'd had an anonymous report or whatever that they had some uranium in there, and you think it just didn't ring true that's
Yeah.
why. I mean, even if they had some kind of information through some sort, you wouldn't just walk in and go, "Hi guys, we've not got a warrant, but we're just
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
ask you because
Oh,
that's
just wondering if you're building a bomb.
yeah, it just wouldn't work like that. It would, they'd
Well, look
be
how it worked with Bob Lazar.
Mm.
The US military turned up, stormed his house. There was
Yeah.
machine guns
Yeah.
and flak jackets everywhere looking for this element 115. So what a difference in approach when a guy just
Yeah.
wanders in. He's like, oh, hey.
Yeah. It kind of leads me to speculate that perhaps they just wanted a little look about, wanted a little
I
chat.
think so. I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah. Okay. Christopher Sharp of Liberation Times.
Yeah,
He's a big player at the moment, isn't he? He's
he is.
all
He
over the
is.
internet. He's his
Not
news
long after
outlet.
his interview with you, he
Mm.
dropped that absolute bombshell about crash retrieval.
Yeah.
Um, and that was headline news. I know he works for a newspaper, but it was headline news everywhere. So I have to admit, when I was reading about him and I was like, oh, Daily Mail, oh no, here we go. But then he was such a legend and a really nice guy as well. So that one's entirely on me.
Yeah, and he's it's interesting how he's been kind of accepted into the some of the big names, Lou Elizondo, within a couple of months, there's a photo of him having a beer with Lou Elizondo on his
Yeah.
on his. I'm thinking, what, but he's been
Yeah.
adopted. They've adopted him, and
Yeah.
Corbell's atting him, and
Yeah,
um,
yeah. I
yeah,
think I'd call that like the George Knapp effect. Like
mm,
they're definitely, you're telling me they're not checking everybody out and going, right, don't go on that show. You're going to look
yeah,
an idiot. We're going to, that's going to move the needle. This guy is good. George
mm,
Knapp is bomb proof. He's walked
yeah,
the walk. He's a super professional. If they say edit that out, he will.
yeah,
And I think he's got that kind of thing about him. He's got the integrity, he's got the honesty. He's a young guy, so that probably resonates with the people that they want to get this information
mm.
trickled out to. So, really interesting guy, and I wish him all the best. He's doing awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's probably going to be, if he sticks at it, he'll probably be the future George Knapp. He's kind of in
Mm.
there. He's 100% focused on this subject, and he's kind of moved away from almost all other subjects, and it's
Yeah,
purely
yeah.
UFO UAP.
In
Um,
fact, that tirade I just had about recruiting to SAPs, I believe it was him that actually said that about how hard it is and the drought
yes,
kind of
yeah,
behind the curtain.
yeah,
So I'm not going to take any credit for that, but yeah, very insightful guy.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, Luigi Venditelli. Luigi. So Luigi was your suggestion. And brilliant. Thank you. It
Well,
worked out very well.
thank you
Very
for getting
well.
him on. He certainly wouldn't have come on my. Hey, can I just have a chat with you for a bit?
I don't know. I think he
But
would. He's a super,
he's
super kind
such a
guy.
nice guy. I have spoken to him on Instagram. That my own little trumpet moment was when he announced that he was working with Unreal.
Mm,
Because I've got a gaming PC and I love all that side of things. So I was like, oh my god, the possibilities of Unreal. Because at the time it was Unreal 4. And then he replied to me and was like, Psst, it's Unreal 5, which for anybody that isn't kind of into that kind of thing, that's the difference between you can't tell it's not real and it looking like a computer game. So for me, that was like, oh my god! But I couldn't believe he just kind of reached out anyway. But what an exciting guy! He's got DeLoreans. He's got Bob
yeah.
Lazar. He's a legend.
Yeah.
And I love the way that he's legitimizing. This is like that bridge between the Paola Harris that we were talking about. Like he's taking an old school,
Yeah.
part of this law and bringing it with hypermodern tech so that we're going to be in a 1970s environment in VR,
Mm,
interacting with it in a really modern way. So, what a legend. What a
yeah.
legend. And he's got other projects lined up coming too. This isn't just going to be a one trick pony kind of thing. So,
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, he's investing a lot of his time and his business in bringing this forward and telling the Bob Lazar story. And I think
mm,
what he comes out with, and obviously we got a flavor of that in the podcast, but it's going to be fascinating. You'll be able to walk into, Area 51, walk about,
yeah.
have a look, and yeah, just fascinating stuff.
They said they've done the Disney thing and digitally de-aged Bob so that you can like when because there's a DVD coming out first, I think, and it's going to be like Bob in the 70s talking about what it was like in the 70s, and then kind of switch to the modern Bob now. So yeah, it just sounds awesome, man.
Yeah, and his grandfather. So again, it's one of those. Is this story from his grandfather of a sighting when he was younger, and
Mm,
how his family kind of told him to shut up, didn't take it seriously, and he kind of felt that that was really unfair. You know, his
yeah.
granddad, my granddad doesn't lie. You know, he's
Mm,
telling the truth, and that kind of stuck with him. And then again, later in life, he's creating content
yeah.
that's
Pushing
progressing
the
the
needle.
subject. Yeah, yeah, fascinating guy. Okay, so I feel like we should have some kind of like a music box button to press with like some Darth Vader music for the next one. So Mick
In the red corner.
so Mick West.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Mick West. So I I contacted Mick and I thought let me lay this out because I got a lot of heat for this. I got a lot of messages from people saying why give him airtime, why talk to him, why waste your time, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And so my thought process was he's got a different perspective to me, different mindset, different opinions, but I've seen him talking online, and he
Hmm.
was very open about his thoughts and how he came to those conclusions. Very analytical. I
Yeah.
kind of felt like he missed out intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know, but he missed out certain parts. So, for example, he would he's very data driven, as I say, very
Yeah.
analytical, very data driven. However, doesn't accept witness testimony necessarily as data.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at a subject that potentially has low observability built
Hmm.
into it, baked into it, and
Mm,
actually witness testimony becomes much more powerful data. And if you
yeah.
disregard that data, then of course you've got no data whatsoever, and this is just a seagull or a balloon.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's
and
one thing Gary Nolan said, isn't it? Like how much of this kind of what Mick would require would explain as unreliable data, like
mm,
all of a sudden you're drowning in discardable data, and at some point yeah, it has to be worth more
yeah,
inspection. But
yeah. Yeah, for me, it was it. I wanted to get that point across that look, I've spoken to people, and over the course of having the account and talking to people on the podcast, and kind of behind the scenes talking to people, messages and stuff,
yeah,
lots of people had quite significant experiences with, corroborated by family members, several people. They've
yeah,
found it in the press as well at the same time it happened. So it's corroborated from them, from their relatives that were with them or their friends, and in the local press. So other complete strangers, and there might have been a photograph, might have been a very good photograph, but all of these pieces kind of came together. And I think I'd had a conversation with him shortly after. Sorry, I'd had a conversation with another lady, Cindy Bassett or Bissett. Sorry, Cindy Bissett,
hmm,
who I'd recorded it quite a while ago, and I'll come to that in a bit. But I'd recorded it previously and had this conversation with her, and she'd seen it with pretty much her whole family. And to then go and speak to Mick, who basically says, "Look, this is some kind of psychological,
yeah,
issue," and it just doesn't make sense to me that an entire
doesn't sit right.
family would have the same experience, be able to draw the same experience. It just doesn't. I can't.
Yeah,
I can't get it. I can't get my head around that. So
yeah,
for me, that is witness testimony. That is really significant, compelling data. We
mm,
put people in prison for their entire life on less, less data, less witness
yeah,
testimony, and so we should be able to use this. And so that was
yeah.
kind of the bone of contention between the two, and I really wanted to have that conversation with him in a
Uh,
respectful way. Um,
yeah, I think it's really important that you did, mate, because it's easy to have an echo chamber. Um, it's more important. Like Martin Luther King said, hate doesn't drive out hate,
yeah,
and you have to understand somebody that disagrees with your opinions. So you've got to let them talk. I mean, I watched him debating Eric Weinstein, um, which was just verbal combat. So the way that you allowed him to speak his piece, and have his chance without being necessarily battered down with the low hanging fruit things that
yeah,
we can.
yeah,
It's important because at the end of the day, do we want disclosure for the little niche of people that already believe in it?
mm,
Or do we want people that are of Mick West's opinion? Because he's not the only one,
mm,
if we can find a way to make a few bridges and build some communication with people like that, then we can all benefit from it. You know, I'm sure that a skeptic is a really important person to have every now and then, because they're going to pull the wool from your eyes every now and then. But just like anything, you can have a true believer or you can have a true disbeliever, and it's important to have that whole spectrum of guests. So I personally praise you for having him on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. It was definitely well worth doing. And I have offered for him, and there's another chap. They're heavily debating the I think it is the Joe Biden's the LAX orb near the Joe Biden plane, isn't it? Is that the one that
Yeah,
we were talking about earlier? Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's kind of deep in a 100 tweet long debate with another chap,
Mm.
guy called Marek. So I've kind of offered them both to come on the podcast, and I'll kind of
Oh
host it
wow.
and be a middle.
Ooh.
They won't take me up on it, I'm sure, but I'll put the offer out there. So if they want to,
Yeah, and it's better to
yeah,
have a
jump on.
platform like that than just on Twitter where everyone's just
Yeah.
firing Twitter bullets at each other, you know?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to look at somebody in the face and have a conversation. It's
Yeah.
easy to just send a tweet, isn't it? And off it goes. And then half an hour later,
Yeah.
see that's wrong. Send
Yeah,
another
yeah,
one.
yeah. Yeah, as easy as it is for us to criticize some of Mick's opinions, he feels just as easy to criticize ours. So, you
Mm,
know, we're kind of in the same boat, but yeah, at some point we've got to start shaking hands instead of throwing stones.
yeah, definitely. Okay, Ezra Kelderman. What do you think about Ezra?
Ezra, very, very intelligent. And it shows how many of, because he's obviously Galileo Project.
Yeah.
It shows one thing that it really showed out with him was how many of today's, like, what we would call a big player, you know, the people that are moving and shaking, are actually experiences.
Mm,
You know, Gary Nolan, Jim Semivan, all of these people. So very interesting to have him, where Avi Loeb has been very reserved about, um, almost on the Mick West side of things, of saying, like, you know, witness testimony is nonsense, and that this stuff over Ukraine is just bullets and cannon shells and stuff like that. And he's really in his own lane. So to have a guy who's an experience of that, I mean, I say that, and Gary Avi Loeb was on today saying that he'd spoken to somebody from Lockheed Martin and said, "Come on, level with me. Have you guys got one?" And his friend was like, "Maybe." So he's kind of going through that ontological shift now as well.
mm,
But it was, yeah, really interesting to see experiences in there working for it as well, because they're the guys with that personal drive, and that's going to steer it in the right
yeah.
direction. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. He was fascinating experience in his younger years, and again, he's taken that on and somehow found his
Mm.
way into a role where he does this for a living. This is his job now, and he's
Mm.
looking into the sky for evidence of something else. And I think he's going to be, it's going to be the Galileo project, the Sol Foundation,
Yeah.
Americans for Safe Aerospace. It is, my belief is it's unlikely to be the government to come out and say this is exactly
Yeah.
what we've got. We'll tell you all about it. And actually,
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
got you've got organisations like Galileo and Sol who come out and say, well, we're not linked to that. We're not too interested
Yeah.
in national security or all of these kind of things that we
Yeah.
have to be. This is just what we found from a scientific perspective,
Yeah.
and I think
I think
Ezra's
a
at the
Nobel
forefront of that.
Prize is a very inviting open
Yeah,
goal, isn't it? So yeah,
yeah,
cool, man.
yeah. So YK Warner, he's British chap, director. We'd had contact beforehand. He wasn't too keen to come on and do the podcast. He wanted to, share his experience, and I really
Hmm.
appreciate him sharing his experience with me. But his experience was, stayed with him for many years, and
Mm.
wasn't so open about talking about it with other people. I think he'd mentioned speaking to a few people, but as an experience like that was fascinating. Huge, giant, definitely not human, can't be, and to have
Yeah,
that for
like the old
many
spinning
years.
top with covered in
Yeah,
lights kind of looking thing. Yeah,
yeah,
awesome. Again, like that Swedish one that you got me to do the
mm,
guitar track for, reminded me of that, or the Close Encounters. You know, that kind of aesthetic to it. So
yeah,
yeah, awesome. I
yeah.
would love to see something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, me too. But no, it was, I appreciated him coming out and talking about it, and I know he was not too keen at first, but then he jumped on and he was great, and thanks for that. If you're
Mm,
listening, YK, cool guy, and hopefully we'll talk in the future. And I think potentially work on a project in the future as well.
mm,
So Cindy Bissett, so I mentioned her earlier on. So she was she'd had that experience with her family, as we said.
mm.
Really, real lovely human being. Really enjoyed talking to her, and she'd, I think, worked in sort of nursing for her whole life, and she was kind of the first person on the podcast who was kind of like someone that I would have, I've met plenty of nurses in my time, and
Mm.
people in that kind of um, lifestyle, I guess. You're certainly living in the countryside. It's where I live.
Yeah,
is So it's kind of somebody I would have potentially spoken to in the past, whereas some movie star wouldn't have, or some engineer from Harvard I wouldn't necessarily have spoken to. So it was
mm.
nice to have that kind of down to earth conversation with her, and get her kind of take on things, and the fact that she'd kind of kept it to herself for all those years, and her dad had said
Yeah,
we don't talk about this because we'll be
yeah.
ridiculed. And I think she said afterwards, it felt really good, getting it on air,
Getting it
and
out. Yeah,
yeah,
she's lovely. I mean, she reminds me so much of Chris Bledsoe and his family, how they're just humble, like good, honest people. They don't want to be on posters and movie
yeah,
stars and stuff like that. She's just had an honest experience, really internalized it, but she's just speaking the truth. It's obvious. I found it really interesting, though. I mean, she's obviously been around a lot of trauma. She's a crisis intervention nurse and stuff like
mm,
that, and there seems to be a real link between people that have either experienced it or have compassion, um, and then them having sightings or getting more into the weird side of things. So fascinating account, and she was just obviously telling the truth. So
mm,
yeah, it would be fascinating to have Mick West watch it, and yeah, because he couldn't say that she's lying, and nobody could. You know what I mean? She'd pass the
yeah,
lie detector test all day. Um, so yeah, lovely lady.
yeah, yeah. So Keith Taylor, Ted Rowe. So Keith came back on again for the second time with
Yeah.
Ted Rowe this time, specifically talking about UAP Med that Ted had set up, and I know that Keith was helping him with. So for those that haven't watched the episode, or don't know about it, it's essentially an organization which are trying to create some kind of process or literature to help first responders for UAP related medical matters. And I guess that's kind of things like trauma, and but also fast time responses. So if things are to happen and somebody says, this, I've experienced this thing, and there's a negative impact on their health, this is kind of a formal way for them to get this out there to those people who would be their first point of contact.
Mm.
So it's something that you would think that if this is a real thing, the government should be doing something to have some
Yeah.
processes in place. And because the government isn't, they're doing it
Mm.
themselves. And we're coming
Mm.
back to that original Soul Foundation, Galileo
Yeah.
project,
Yeah.
UAP
Yeah.
Med. We're doing it anyway because we can't wait for them to do it. So it
Yeah.
was, for me, it was cool to see um, kind of private
Yeah.
organizations and individuals just, well, we're not waiting for them, we're going to do it ourselves.
Yeah. It really reminds me of Ryan Graves. I mean, Ryan
Mm.
Graves, you won't get him going, oh, it's little green men and they've got laser guns and stuff like that. He's saying there's a relevant safety issue affecting people's mental health, and they're not being allowed to give accounts, and that's just dishonest. That's
Yeah,
something needs to be done. So he's taken it on himself. And yeah, Dr. Keith and Ted, they're doing exactly the same thing, but to a whole different field of
yeah,
professionals in a high professionality, high stress environment. So legends, great
yeah,
guys.
yeah, absolutely. Chris Romwell, stuntman. So I was fascinated, and I'll put my hands up to this. I kind of, I'd say that I probably didn't do a great job on this podcast because I was so interested in his job, because being a stuntman was amazing. I was like,
Yeah.
I was super excited to just talk to him about that, and I didn't know that he had had a sighting himself, or an experience himself, before talking
Hmm.
to him. So really, I was, I had a few questions I wanted to ask him about what his take was, but also I was interested in him as a person, and how, you know how what his day looks like. That was
Yeah. I think that's
and
really valid, though. It's something that we don't see as the general public.
yeah,
You might see him on Corridor Crew criticizing some stunts or something like that. But yeah, a really cool guy. I mean, his sighting of a large triangle and repressed memory and whatnot was really cool. But like you said, it's important to know the man behind the
Mm.
sighting. But and what a
Yeah.
dynamic guy! What a dude!
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
a little bit jealous. I saw that bit of him on the motorbike, obviously filming the bit where Chris Pratt's got the velociraptors either
Yeah.
side, and
Yeah.
I was slightly jealous. But yeah, what a world that must be.
Yeah, so he's for those who don't know, he's Chris Pratt's stunt double. So you'll see him
Mm.
in films doing a lot of the stunts, and he wherever Chris Pratt goes, he will go because he's a stuntman. I think he was I can't remember who said he was.
Hemsworth first.
Hemsworth. That's right.
Yeah.
Hemsworth stunt double first. But I think he's such a, I mean, he's a good looking guy. He's, fit, strong. He's obviously making connections. So I think he's probably going to be a big old movie star at some point in the future, but, in his own right. But, real interesting life that he leads.
Yeah.
He's got a young guy as well. Super
Yeah,
young guy.
yeah. And another guy though who's a witness who's turned into somebody that's actually producing something which is probably going to bring new people in because
Yeah.
he's going into multimedia, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, writing his script,
Mm,
screenplay for extraterrestrial related storyline. We keep coming back to it, don't we? They
mm.
have this experience, and then later in life, they are in the creative world, and
Yeah.
that pushes the envelope forward.
Mm, mm.
Okay, so let's talk about Tony Dean Smith. I love this guy,
Me
absolutely.
too.
Such a cool guy. I mean, and I've never physically met him. And I know it's a cliche thing to say, but and I don't throw that word love about very much. But just a real man crush on him. He's such a
Yeah,
cool
what a
guy.
legend.
Yeah, and really warm. And I knew that he'd had this experience. I knew that because we'd been talking for a long time. And we'd shared direct messages and stuff. Never met, but we'd shared direct messages.
Mm,
And I said, look, you've got to, let's talk. Let's come on the
mm.
podcast. I would, even if we didn't record it, I want to, but he was
Yeah.
super in demand, really talented guy.
Mm,
And he was filming for Paramount, I think, and directing a film, and he was going abroad and flying around. And so we'd exchanged kind of voice notes, and we talked, and
mhm.
finally got him on, and it was brilliant. And I would, really, really appreciate it, and get a bit more about his story, his experience. And it was just a fascinating story, just you don't get much better than a skyscraper sized craft,
Yeah,
that your whole
absolutely.
family witnesses. Um, and again, coming back to that, he's a creative person. That
Yeah,
experience is, multiplied, and he's,
yeah. That trickle down effect kind of thing.
yeah.
Do you know, with him, like again, I really kind of felt like, oh, I would genuinely like this guy.
Mm,
Um, but for me, like the most interesting part about his interview, which might be a kind of a moot point for some, is he was there saying like, "Oh yeah, I saw this capital ship skyscraper side on in the sky," and he's talking about it quite passionately and openly. And then where the stigma did start to bite him a little bit, he goes, "Yeah, well, I meditate a little bit," and it's like, wow, like surely that's an easy thing to talk
yeah.
about as opposed to something like that. So it kind of really that's from the side of my life where I've experienced like that strange side as well. I kind of found that really interesting that he found it harder to talk about meditation and his journeys he's
Mm,
been on there rather than Independence Day happening right in front of him kind of
yeah.
thing. You'd think that would be easier for people to swallow, but
Yeah.
fascinating guy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm almost certainly going to talk again, and we'll fingers crossed have another podcast next year, and we'll
Mm,
talk a bit more about great guy. Okay, so Matt Laslo.
yeah,
Matt Laslo, for those who don't know, if you haven't watched the podcast, he's a congressional journalist. I think he's mainly Congress kind
yeah,
of.
yeah.
Yeah, he's a professor as well, and so he runs Ask a Poll, which is kind of like an online broadcast thing, news outlet, independent. Yeah, great guy. Really
What a
enjoyed
guy.
talking to him, and he's just, he reminded me of this kind of just like slightly scatty kind of old school. Some, you'd see sort of Michael Keaton running around,
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
investigate a case where, he's
Yeah, yeah.
not
The
trying.
classic gonzo journalist, like
Yeah,
Hunter S. Thompson style.
yeah,
Like, What a guy.
Yeah, really, really enjoyed that conversation. Real freestyle. Let me just show you my bookshelf, and off we go to the other end of
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
To the end of it. Okay, well, this is unique.
yeah.
But
I can
yeah,
imagine if you're a Congress person with some skeletons in your closet, he
mm,
is your worst nightmare. Because I
yeah,
bet he's just got pure Jack Russell energy,
yeah,
at his job. What a great guy though, and a real like mover and shaker. I'd
mm,
imagine once he gets hold of this bone, he's just going to keep rattling until something comes loose. So
yeah.
what a
And
cool
that's what you
guy.
want, isn't it? You don't what you want is somebody that's going to go and ask. Like I'll go and ask a hundred senators what they think about UAPs. Like, there's
Mm,
no other journalist on
no.
that's going to do that. Not a single one. And
Mm,
it's so nice to know that there's somebody like that in
yeah.
Congress, because Congress is, it's the most powerful. The American, let's face it, the American government is the most powerful government in the world. I think. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not great on politics, but I think so. To have somebody like that in the halls of power, running around with his notepad and
Mm,
pen, just recording people. What do you think? Why is that? And
yeah.
then coming
Yeah.
back afterwards and being so. If you follow him online on Twitter X, and ask a poll, he will just, he'll say what he thinks about this person, and then he'll go back the next day and talk to them again. He doesn't
Yeah.
care. He doesn't care.
He's a real door kicker, and that's
Yeah.
that's what they need. I mean, look at our. I think we're so many people have lost faith in the media narratives and kind of news networks and stuff like that. It's so rewarding to think that there's still people out there that are
Yeah.
going to be a nightmare for the right people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, Chris Leto. Chris
Yeah,
Leto. So former F-16, F-18,
yeah.
F-16,
F-16.
F-16,
Yeah,
F-16 pilot. Turned YouTuber, I guess.
yeah,
He's out there now, isn't he? He's lots of I see his face popping up all over the place.
yeah.
Well into it. I found him to be really refreshing because
Hmm.
he told me what he thought, which
Yeah.
it wasn't on the fence, wasn't kind of I think it could be this. He's, this is what I think, and
Mm.
it was great to get a take from him, and for him to kind of put his eggs kind of in a basket, and yeah, so
Oh
that was
yeah, he set out his stall, and I really respect him for that. But, we've all got our own take on it,
mm,
but not many people are out just there going, "Yeah, bang, this is my theory. Judge me or not, whatever. I don't care. This is what I think's happening." And it's one thing I love about Chris is the the journey that like he's been on, like since his first videos where he's very kind of nuts and bolts and David Fravor, and now he's talking about about sort of scaling reality and
mm,
fractals and all this kind of stuff, and it's awesome to kind of be along for the ride with him.
yeah, definitely. Okay, so the last most recent podcast would be
Mm,
Trey Akerman.
yeah,
Um, so Trey, I've been talking to Trey a little bit before we did the podcast, and he'd created this picture, and I put it up on the screen for people to see in the podcast, of his site, and I thought, oh, this is not. I mean, it was like a proper like 3D render,
yeah.
render photo or picture, um, and I started researching who's this guy and into me, and I seem to be drawn towards people involved in music or
Mm.
film. I'm obsessed with music and film. So if somebody's got a UFO sighting or experience and they're interested in music, which are like two of my favorite things, I need
Hmm.
to talk to them on a podcast. So we got talking, um you know sighting in his, I think in his, I want to say his teens, perhaps early
Hmm.
20s, possibly teens. And that's he was unlike a lot of the other people in that kind of creative industry where they will talk about it, will talk about other people, and they're at the forefront of bringing this stuff out to the public with their creativity. They've had an experience, they write a script, or they'll talk about it, or they'll just open about it. He was kind of not so much that way, didn't really talk too much about it, and commented that this stuff coming out now is kind of felt like validation.
Mm.
And I kind of got the impression that he, wasn't 100% sure if he should talk to me on air and, have a
Yeah,
podcast, but he did. And, I really appreciated him for doing that. And it was, really interesting insight into his life and the music side of it
and
as
the
well.
things he's seen. I mean, Janis
Yeah.
Joplin with two crates of Jack Daniels. And right, it's time for you to go home, son.
Yeah.
The things he must have seen.
How can you imagine?
What an upbringing that must have been for
Mm,
him. Kind of, and that's obviously you can see how that would shape you into being a really good observer kind of seeing all these people that are, like he said, there's like vice presidents and stuff coming to meet his dad to hang out and stuff like that. So it must have been, it must have taught him to kind of not take things for granted and just see someone as so and so off the telly and actually, you know what I mean? See the
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
behind the curtain side. So yeah, really cool
mm,
guy, really nice
yeah,
guy.
definitely. All right, so that is all of the that's all of the podcast. We've got some questions, so I put out, as I
Yeah.
said, put out a few a bit sort of the feelers last couple of days. If anyone had any questions we wanted to us to discuss or for me to answer, then let us know. So we've got a few. We have got a
Mm.
few. I'm not, just so people out there listening know, I'm not going to put the name of who's put the question in, mainly because I haven't asked you if you're happy to be named. And I know some people are, some people aren't. And equally, some people have sent in the same question. So, I've kind of amalgamated it into one.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump in. So the first question.
Yeah, sure. So you don't post much Stephen Greer stuff. Why is that, mate?
um, because I mean, I've put a few things out to do with Stephen Greer. I don't. I mean, he's not. There's not a lot of new stuff. There's a few bits
Yeah.
he's put out in the past. The People's Hearing at the National Press
Mm.
Club. I think it was what 2012,
Disclosure
2013.
Project and that.
That's
Yeah.
right. So he's heavily involved. Loads of stuff out there, and I've put a few bits out. And he's an interesting character, and people, I think, a bit like a Marmite. You either love him or hate him. But he seems to be kind of popping up a lot more now. And I did put a post out, I think, a couple of days ago, which was him and Louis Elizondo, who seem to be taking shots at each other.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your take on that then?
I think they're taking shots at each other.
Well, yeah, yeah, but I mean, I'm not going to ask you to lose a future potential guest, but do you think any one of them is kind of obviously got a little bit more um, substance to their
Yeah,
argument? Or
I think if we talk about credibility, I think probably Louis Zondo's got more credibility because of where he's come from and
mm,
because there doesn't seem to be a sort of a financial tie to him and his position. That's not to say,
yeah,
I know he's selling the book soon and stuff, and I don't begrudge people for making a few quid or selling a book.
no,
He's had an incredible life, and why not write a book? People write a book about non-UFO related military life or,
yeah,
ex-CIA or ex-Pentagon life or whatever. So good luck to him. Why not? Why not, provide some cash for his family and be able to do
mm,
things, before you punch out. But I think I like Lou. I find him fascinating. I'm trying to, I'll talk more about that another time. But trying to create
yeah.
something that perhaps we would we'd put out ourselves
Mm-hmm.
in the
I
coming
think with
year.
Stephen Greer, he's like it. Stephen Greer is such a difficult character to just go, "Yep, that's him in a box," because like his early career with your Jacques Vallées and your Paola Harris and your Linda Moulton House, they were shaking trees
Mm,
when the stigma was absolutely prevalent. And to bring out those veterans and try and do what he's done in his early career, it's easy to tar him with the brush now, where he's doing his different thing now. And some people really like what he's doing now and don't care about what he's done before. So he's kind of changed his approach so much. So it's so easy to kind of make the mistake of just putting him in one little pigeonhole as for one thing that you may not resonate with, you know?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to sit on the fence really for my final answer.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's going to be my answer at this
Well,
point.
that's fair enough.
Yeah, I just for me, I mean, it's just what you see and what people say, and I think for me, I prefer to have some kind of information or evidence that helps me formulate an opinion. And if
Hmm.
I haven't really got enough, other than he makes loads of money, therefore don't listen to him, which is
Yeah.
what a lot of the narrative is about Stephen. I
Yeah.
don't like going with that really, and the same for like Lou, because he's ex-Pentagon,
Yeah.
therefore he's a misinformation agent, etc., etc. I don't buy that either because
No.
you can come from somewhere like that, be patriotic, care about disclosure.
Don't forget, Lou's lost his pension by coming out as a whistleblower. So I don't mind going the guy telling a book
Yeah,
to keep the lights on there. But
yeah.
hmm.
All right, next question. What have we
Next one.
got?
Would you like to see a UFO, UAP, whatever? And how do you think you'd react?
Yes,
That's a
absolutely.
very
Yes,
a
I
very
would.
wide net to
So
throw, but
we my partner and I bought. We've had a baby, so we wanted to get a slightly bigger house because the last house 2 bedrooms, and I've got 3 kids. So we wanted a bigger house, and this one has got little conservatory, but it's got like a skylight in the conservatory, like a big
ooh,
glass window. It's very posh. I've never had one before. But for me, I was like, I'm going to lie on the floor every night, and I'm going to look up and just wait to see something. And unfortunately, the glass is covered in like green algae, so I can't see anything at the moment.
oh.
And then I injured my shoulder, or pre-injured my shoulder. I had surgery on my shoulder, so I couldn't really climb up on the roof to clean it. So
Yeah.
at some point, I'm going to clean it, and I'll be able to sit there. So yeah, absolutely, I would love to see one. I
Hmm.
spend lots of time. Any opportunity I get, I'll sit up, I'll get a coffee, and I'll just look out in the hope to see something. But I haven't. And I have to be
Yeah.
honest with you. Lots of people ask me that, and I get DMs. What have you seen? I haven't. Nothing that I could say for sure is not conventional. It doesn't have a conventional explanation. What would I
Hmm.
do? I don't know. I'd like to think that it wouldn't make much difference because right now I'm kind of in it, and I know there's something. Um, I don't know. It's a difficult one to speculate on.
I think it's an impossible question to answer.
Mm,
What would you do?
yeah,
Isn't it?
yeah.
But fascinating, fascinating. So what as a tie on to that then? What got you into this? What was your kind of ontological journey from waking up to this subject?
Um, it's a difficult question. I think I've always had an interest in the subject from as far back as I can remember, and I can't put my finger on what it was specifically. And it's probably film and TV. I would guess would be
Mm-hmm.
in my imagination. Probably that X Files. I know I was into X Files years and years ago. I found that fascinating. Interestingly, not so much the UFO related stuff, the storylines. It was kind of more of the crime and weird and
Subterfuge, yeah.
investigating and all that. I found that interesting. But so it's always been there, and I guess there've been a few bits and pieces that have happened throughout the years where I've seen something in terms of a TV show or documentary or something online, and it's kind of reignited things. And as it's been like a slow burn over the
Mm-hmm.
years. And I guess probably similar to other people, around about the time that the 3 videos were released and the New York
Yeah.
Times article, and then David Fravor and Alex Dietrich did
Mm.
the 60 Minutes, and roughly around that time, basically, Alex Dietrich and David Fravor, um, and that's it. And at that point, it just shot back up my interest
Mm.
hugely, and I think it was been in a much much more, how do I put it? I think from that point, when we had COVID and then Arrow, and then we're at home and we're spending a lot more time online.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you interested in when you're at home and you're looking online? If you're interested in UFOs, and you're just going to be topped up on UFO UAP related content more so than you would be if you were out and about doing stuff, which you couldn't do because
Mm.
of COVID. And then David Grush comes along, and that's it. Bang.
Yeah.
I'm all in.
Boom.
I'm all in at that
Yeah.
point. So yeah, that's
Awesome.
probably it.
Nice. Nice. So the next one, do you think that there is a link to missing persons and abductions?
Um, no. So, but I'd say no only because to say yes, you have to. For me, I'd have to have a bit more information. I'd have to have a decent amount of witness testimony, credible witness testimony, and kind of other data for me to go,
Hmm.
yeah. And I personally don't feel like there's enough witness testimony for abductions relating to missing people. So I have to kind of go with no until there's some evidence to say yes, and I'm open to saying yes, but yeah,
Hmm.
I'm going to
Oh,
say
that's
no.
a very, very good answer. So what are your predictions for this coming year then, mate?
This
Put your
coming
chips
year,
on the table. Yeah.
um, well, this coming year, so I want to do 50, 52. How many weeks a year are there? 52.
Yes.
I just had mind freeze. Hang on a minute. It is 52. Yeah,
Yeah.
52. Of course it is. So 52 podcasts, one a week.
Yeah.
I was kind of doing a couple a week. One week I did like three. It's just too much to do, research, edit, post, So one a week is better for me because I can research people. I'm a bit more
Yeah.
comfortable. I've got time to put it out. So that's kind of the plan, a bit more professional. I'm
Mhm.
hoping that Tom Vernon helps me on some of these podcasts and we have some co-hosting.
Absolutely love to. Yeah.
That's the plan. That's the plan. So hopefully we'll get a few where we'll do some co-hosting on those.
Mm.
I've got sort of plans in the works at the moment, early stages for a documentary, UFO related. But again, I'll say more when I can on that one. So there's that. What else is there? Just cracking on, just doing lots and lots of UFO related stuff, really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the field's changing so fast. Like the snowball's getting bigger, rolling down the mountain, isn't it? I think we just need to hold on and
yeah.
see where it takes us for
Well,
now.
this is it.
That
I
links
mean,
on. Sorry.
sorry, go for it.
Oh no, I was just going to say like that links on to the next one where it says, "Is there a team that runs this account?"
Is there a team? Well, okay. So this floor is the recording floor. Upstairs is the editing floor. We've got 5 or 6 people at the moment. No, there isn't. There is just me with help from people like yourself doing making tracks and running ideas past me and it's kind of a community the way I see it. Like people will send me stuff and I'll get maybe I don't know anywhere from 20 to 100 DMs a day. I can't get
Wow.
through everything, but some days it can be the lower end, other days it can be the higher end. And some of that stuff is just hi, how are you? Other things are like, do you want to buy my cryptocurrency that doesn't exist? Whereas,
Yeah.
whereas, whereas other people like, here's some footage that I filmed. What do you think? And other people that is a photo I took, and people wanted to talk about stuff. So for me, it's kind of people that follow the account will talk to me and share stuff with me, and that kind of gives me some material to go. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. I'll have a
Yeah.
look at that, and that kind of
I
takes me off little rabbit holes.
definitely think your wife deserves the MVP award though for all the times when you're not there in the middle of the night because you're uploading to
Yeah.
YouTube or editing reels or whatnot. So
Yeah, I
there's,
didn't
you've
realize
got a
how long
team.
it took to render and then
Yeah.
upload to two different platforms. You're like,
YouTube's
okay,
brutal. Yeah.
yeah, it is. I mean, I'm sort of thinking about this one. We obviously people don't know, but we're filming this like started at 6. I'm going to try and put it out for 9, so I'm going to have to like. It's going to be a fast one.
It's
It's going to
gonna
be a
be
fast one.
see
It's
how it
gonna,
goes, man.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
going to push it, and then we can sing in the new year.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, just me, and I'm, I don't. Yeah, I put. I've had time because I had a shoulder surgery. So, and I spend time on Instagram anyway,
Hmm.
and obviously the podcast a relatively new aspect to the
Yeah.
account, I guess. Um,
And just for clarity, then, because another question is, um, yeah, what do you do as a profession, and can you do this full time, or is this just in your spare time?
so yeah, just in my spare time.
It's not like
Thankfully,
the CIA are paying you to put out these podcasts.
I mean, it would be nice. It would, that would sort of cover the fees of the editing and the
Yeah.
premium supplies and the Zoom and no, it's I don't get paid. I don't have any affiliate links. I don't have any like the
Mm.
podcast guests. They come on, they're really kind. They do it for free. I don't pay them.
Yeah.
None of them have ever asked me for money. I don't, Spotify monetization is not switched on.
Hmm.
Um, YouTube, there's no AdSense. So I don't get any adverts, in the videos.
Yeah.
And same, I don't promote stuff. I mean, when guests come on, if they've got a book or if they've got a film, then yeah, of course I'll talk about it because they've been kind enough to come on and
Yeah.
they've got a film and we're going to talk about them and their life and that's part of their life. So we'll talk about it, but I don't take any cut. There's no kickback
Yeah.
for selling a couple of books to me. So it's not, there's no sort of financial incentive. If anything, it's costing me probably about 30, 40 quid a month
Oh,
in fees
guaranteed.
and bits and pieces at least to run it. But that's fine, it doesn't bother me and
But yeah,
I
you've
enjoy
got
it.
that integrity of though, like there's that famous saying of never trust a man that's trying to sell a book. And if you're not doing this to sell t-shirts and bandanas and hoodies and stuff like that, then
Yeah.
you've got clean hands and empty pockets.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. definitely. And I had this conversation with my partner the other day, and she was like, "Well, so is there a way to make some money? Can you get some cash out of it?" I was like, "I mean,
Spotify is going to pay you about zero point 0.3
yeah,
of a pence
yeah."
for every year streamed.
Yeah, it's probably not much money. It's
Yeah.
not. I mean, maybe these people are millions, and they've, but not really. I mean, I wouldn't be against having some way, to at least cover the cost of Zoom,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Canva and all the other bits and pieces for the editing stuff. But, looking 30, 40 quid a month, for me, it doesn't make much difference. And actually,
Yeah.
it's too much like hard work trying to make some money out of it.
Yeah.
And then you've got to think about it. Well, how can I monetize this content? And I'm not interested in that. Let's put some stuff out that's interesting, gets people talking. It's interesting to me, and
Hmm.
maybe you might be on the right side of history by helping progress the cause. So I'll never say never, but I can't think of a
Hmm.
way that I would monetize it that I would feel happy with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Basically,
Totally, man. Well,
yeah.
that links on to another question. So how do you decide what's real and fake to put on your account?
Um, yeah, it's hard. It is hard. I mean, like as I say, people send me stuff. I look at a couple of things. If there's a chain of custody with that footage or with that news article, with that clip, if I know where it's come from, I know it's a relatively reputable source. It's not
Mhm.
total nonsense. Now that there's this thing with people where if you put something out and it's not definitely a UFO because it might be an aeroplane, well, that's still
Yeah.
unidentified. If there's something, it's interesting footage. We
Yes.
don't know what that is. I'm more than happy to put it out. What do people think? A UAP is essentially unidentified. We're not saying non-human intelligence. If I say here's a non-human intelligence, you know, I don't know, sphere out there
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
then that would be different. I would feel like I'd need to put an awful lot more. How can you confirm this? Pentagon
Mm.
can't even do it with hundreds of millions of pounds invested in
Yeah.
Arrow and
Just like
NASA and
David
what have
Grush
you.
says, there's a there,
Mm,
and that's all we know. We're looking
yeah.
at something, so that's
Yeah.
interesting in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of my
Mm.
my mindset is if I find it if I find it compelling and there's a half decent chain of custody, then
Yeah.
yeah, I think yeah, it kind of comes down to me really. I'm my own editor, I guess, and I have editorial
Yeah.
control. I put it out there. People go, it's clearly fake. Okay, and there's probably been a few that I've put out there that I haven't quite put enough kind of due diligence into. Put it out, and yeah, okay, that probably is. And
Yeah.
people have come back and gone, here's a video where that's debunked. Okay, but you see
Well,
accounts where
that's
they've got
exactly what happened
clearly,
to Chris Lato, isn't it? Sorry,
yeah,
sorry to jump in. That's exactly what happened to Chris Lato because he had the podcast with the M370
yeah,
flight um, before it was debunked, and he was just like, "Yeah, hands up, fooled me," or whatever. And
mm,
I know that's still an ongoing. It is. It isn't. It isn't. It isn't Punch and Judy show of a topic, but yeah, you've just got to use your gut, haven't you, at the end of the
yeah,
day, and be honest. Like none of us know what it is, so no one's going to get it right all the time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. What else have we got? Let's have a look at some of the other questions.
So, who I'm not going to ask you who your least favorite was because that's just mean. But who's been your favorite guest so far?
Um, I would say, I mean, it's difficult because I enjoyed them in different ways. I think, but to
Yeah.
kind of, I'd have to come back to it'd be a split between Adam Simon and Tony Dean Smith. It would have to
Hmm.
be a split between the two of them. Just because I think I feel like I could be good friends with them, and we could,
Hmm.
I could talk to them for hours and hours and hours, and go out for a beer and have a chat, and those kind of
Yeah.
characters, and just I get a sense of a connection with them. It's not to say that
Yeah.
others weren't great and enjoyed it and like to talk to them again, but there was just that kind of connection, I would say, with them too. Um, so that's what I would go with. What about you?
Nice.
Who would be your favorite? Who's your favorite?
I think that's such a again that's such a it's such a kind of trip up question because this I feel like you've got great guests, but then you've got those people that will drop
Hmm.
something where you're like, oh my god, and so it's not always the best guest that comes out with the best snapshot. I know that's a very cowardly answer, but I think Tony Dean Smith, um, again, he was just a lovely guy. I really enjoy. I'm gonna zoom out and be cowardly. Like it's so nice to see these people that I know in a conversational situation. Probably wouldn't have anything in common with. So like, just seeing the honest experience of everybody from their different thing, even if I think like, oh, I wouldn't get on with you, or I don't necessarily agree with you. That's been the trend thing that's jumped out. Um, Christopher Romwell, for example, like we never even see those guys face on in the
Mm,
camera. They're
yeah.
literally, they live behind a curtain, usually with a broken leg or something like that. Um, so for every guest that you have where you're like, oh, I really like this guy and I really appreciate what he says. I think it's really important. Chris Latos, for example. I think it's your quieter guests where all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, actually that's really interesting. You can build this kind of pyramid of opinions where everybody's starting at a different place miles away, but we're all trying to converge at some
Yeah.
conclusion of what's going on. So yeah, that's my bottled answer.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right.
So do you think we can get UFO confirmation by government in 2024?
I would say yes, it's possible. I think that it would probably be a kind of a low level of what we would consider to be disclosure. So it's probably like a
Yep.
piece of disclosure, if that makes sense, a small bit. I
Yep.
think when the UAP Disclosure Act comes into full force, I think that we'll probably get some drip feeds, slow release of documents from way back when, and probably some of them will have some information in that makes us think, oh, that's unique, that's different. And I think some people will call that disclosure, and other people say that's not enough to be disclosure. And I think it will be going on for a
Yep.
bit longer because of that. So that's kind of my opinion on it. I think we'll get some stuff next
Mm-hmm.
year. I think it's going to be an interesting year. I
Do you
mean,
think we will in the UK?
I think I will catch up in the UK. We will catch up, but we're certainly behind America. We are a couple of years
Oh
behind.
yeah, I think we do what Daddy America tells us. I think in terms of our disclosure work, don't we?
Yeah.
But
I can't see anything
mm,
happening in terms of government from here. I think in terms of media, we're catching up, but I don't think the government, because you need to have that power from the people to push,
mm,
Congress or whatever. And we don't have that with MPs. I can't see,
no,
30 people from my local village hall go into the local,
the town
MP's
mayor or
office.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, we need this, we need our version of the UAP Disclosure Act. I just can't see it happening anytime soon unless something significant happens. So I think we're a bit behind, and we will be.
Catastrophic disclosure, as is the hot
Yeah,
sort of topic at the moment. Eh?
yeah.
That's really interesting. So another person has said, this is quite a presumptive question. How many different species do you think are interacting with us? I mean, so that's kind of presuming that you think it's alien, or I
Yeah.
think a better question would be, what do you think's going on?
What do you think's going on? That's a broad question, isn't it? I ask,
It
see,
is a very broad question.
and I ask people this all the time, and it must make people, oh, hang on. I mean, it's you could write a 10,000 piece page just on one of the things that might be happening.
Yes.
So I think,
Yeah. Well, what's
so
your favorite little rabbit hole?
I would say it's probably so and I can't put it into like an academic speech. So for me, I
Hmm.
look at it's similar to what Chris Leto was saying with regards to like microscopic life, and that's kind of
Mm.
how I'm able to kind of process it is that if I look down on
Hmm.
my arm, however many hundred years ago, didn't have microscopes, and I look down there and there's
Yep.
nothing there, and then we get a microscope and
Hmm.
I look down there and there's life moving about on my skin, that's mind blowing,
Yeah.
and I think that's
Hmm.
potentially we're at the next phase of that where we find something new on a new version of a microscope, whatever that may be. And then we go, oh, okay,
Mm.
this is unique. Let's rewrite some books. And I kind of think that's where we are now. I don't know what that is,
Hmm.
and it could be
No.
interdimensional. I mean, I love the idea that these drones from from the future coming to check on us, or potentially just drones from somewhere else coming to check.
Hmm.
But I think it's a bit too simple, and it would be the answer as to why. there would be the question as to, well, why haven't NASA picked that up? You've got plenty of live streams. Why haven't, you know, Elon Musk from SpaceX sending people, he would just tell everybody if he'd seen something, and he's involved in space exploration now. And all of these things, why haven't, and it's potentially because of low observability, which kind
Yeah.
of moves me a little bit into the interdimensional consciousness. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. Back at you, Tom. Back at you. What are we
Ooh.
experiencing? What does this represent?
Well, I would. My favorite metaphor, because I love a metaphor, is I saw it on Kurt Jaimungal's Theories of Everything podcast, and he said, if you'll humor me for a sec, there's two little earthworms chilling out, hanging out next to each other, and a human walks by, and they go, "Whoa, it's a god! Look at that thing! It's amazing. I wonder what kind of dirt he likes to eat." Um, the point being, like, we can only see it from our perspective and put it into terms that a human being could understand. I mean, my dog, I can communicate with, I can interact with, but in all the time that it's going to be alive, I'm never going to understand. It's never going to understand council tax and
Yeah.
my motivations and these things like that that are just too big of a concept. And I think that we, as we've seen with Galileo and whatnot, our worldview every now and then, it's like a tectonic plate. It just builds up pressure and then bang, and it'll move forward. So I think my theory is that we aren't complicated enough to understand. We're watching the puppet show, but I don't think we'll ever
Yeah.
really understand the puppeteer side of things. But what I do find fascinating is there's definitely something to do with consciousness, and kind of what people would call the spirit world, or that sort of thing, and energy and resonance, just as much as there is a Marvin the Martian getting in his little sports spacecraft and doodling his way over here. So it's going to be really, Lou Elizondo, again, he made that triangle metaphor of where some people are going to start from the really spiritual side, some people are going to start with nuts and bolts and technology, but at some point it's going to meet in the middle, and that's what I'm kind of in for, is how does science and spirituality eventually like coil up. So a bit of a weird answer for you, but there you go.
It was a much better answer than my answer. Much better. No, I think you're right. I would.
But it's
I'm
such a
gonna.
personal thing.
Mm,
It's such a personal thing for everyone. Like as you've seen with your kind of rich dichotomy of guests, everyone's got their own take on it. But the reason it's such a passionate subject is because it's such a personal, resonating topic with people. And if you are just into secret military tech and don't think that aliens or interdimensional or time travel is a thing, you can still sit alongside us on the bus as we're going along and finding out new stuff. So I just find the more we kind of collaborate on the things that we can agree with and sort of zoom out a little bit rather than being hyper specific with our conclusions, I think that's where we're going to make a bit more progress.
yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, have we got any other questions? What have we got?
We've got one or two, mate. Yeah. So there's one that I've been giggling at a little bit. One person says it would be a human rights violation to withhold ET life and tech from us, right? So I don't know about human rights, but do you think, I mean, that comes under that thing of like, if a flying saucer, and let's say it comes from Mars for the sake of conversation, is that the property of where it lands or the property of humanity?
Yeah.
What's your take on that, mate?
Well, interestingly, that's kind of what the UAP Disclosure Act kind of shoehorns in, isn't it? And I think people have kind of avoided that subject slightly. And I found that fascinating because it essentially gives the government power. If something lands in your back garden and you think it's yours, no. The UAP Disclosure Act says we are taking that, and that comes to the federal government. I think people have kind of missed that part because of the non-human intelligence, all this sort of biologics. That's an important part, isn't it? Because they from now, I guess, now that I think it's passed, isn't it? And it's on to the next phase, and that's it, into law, and you find something, it belongs to the federal government. So
Mm.
I kind of agree. I kind of agree with the person that wrote that question, that it is kind of a human right. It doesn't form part of the Human Rights Act, the European. But if you think from a human perspective, it's a human right to know about science and physics and
Hmm.
biology, and it would seem like a crime against humanity to withhold the meaning of life in some essence, in some respects, I should say.
Mm.
So yeah, I tend to agree with the question. Really, it's yes,
Mm.
it shouldn't be withheld. It should be released, and nobody has a right to, the government.
No matter how good or bad,
Yeah,
do you
no matter
think?
how good or bad, I think we should know. The only caveat that I would put to that is that if there is information that by releasing would help you create some kind of world-ending weapon, then of course, you should keep that safe and secure, and that's the job of
Yeah.
the government, isn't it? The government's job is to keep the
Yeah, yeah.
people safe. And so yeah, if you've got some
Mm.
technology here that actually, if we release all the information, they're going to back engineer it, or just create it. Here's the schematics. Go ahead
Mm.
and make a 10 times
Yeah, yeah.
nuclear bomb. Then of course keep that. But
I
that
think that
shouldn't stop them from coming forward and saying it is real. We do have it. It's interdimensional, or it's extraterrestrial. It did come here, 60 years ago. And so just to
yeah.
let you know, that's correct. But we're not going to tell you exactly how it works because of safety
Yeah,
issues.
yeah.
But it is real.
Well, that's what they've done with the nuclear program, isn't it? We
Mm.
know that nuclear bombs are a thing, but we're
Yeah.
not allowed to know how to make them. And I think like there isn't anybody that wouldn't say that that's fair.
Yeah.
So yes, and the whole rabbit hole about Department of Energy perhaps
Mm.
being the people that have started with the obfuscation of the topic in general. It's really interesting, isn't it? So somebody else has put, in your opinion, what are the best books, or to use a modern take, what are the best sources on this subject?
Oh, that's a good one. So I mentioned earlier I'm dyslexic, so I don't read a lot of books. I do read, and occasionally I
Mm.
read bits and pieces. But I've got such a busy life. So I've got three kids. I work and
Mm.
I'm creating stuff for content creator. Um,
Hmm.
So, I don't have masses of time to read books. And I've got a lot of books that I've never read that I bought. I think one day I'm going to sit down, I'm going to take my time and I'm going to read this book. And now I've got maybe, I don't know, a couple of hundred books over the years that I've not read.
Yeah.
So when I eventually retire, I am going to sit somewhere, on a beach and just get through one book at a time. That is my plan. So, the full disclosure, I don't read a lot of books. But I
Hmm.
do research
But
a lot
where's your kind of,
online. Yeah,
yeah,
so that would
yeah. So you're
be.
probably at the stage where you get most of your news sent to you now, given
Yeah.
that you're an outlet.
Yeah, so I do. I say it's probably still 50-50. So I probably get 50% of my content sent to me, and people sort of suggest things, forward things, send me links, send me videos, send me photos. Um, the other sort of 50% is just everywhere. It's everywhere. I'll go on X, I'll go online, I'll have key search terms
Mm.
saved in Google. So if this pops up, then I'll get an email saying this has popped up.
Ooh.
Um, I follow plenty of people that are, good in the subject. I try and avoid some of the people that have got the overly sensational stuff, although sometimes, that's part of what's happening in the news. So you've got to post some of that sort of stuff and to keep people in the know. I almost feel as if I'm kind of a news source. Like I feel like I'm some people's news source, and I now have like an obligation to be up to date. So I've constantly got in the back of my head, got to see what's happened
A
today.
news source wanting to be neutral and up to date.
Yeah,
Well, that's a very dated theory, mate.
I know, I know. It's yeah, it's a strange thing, but so just everywhere. Yeah, there's no. I mean, you
Mm.
can go if there's people out there that want to find some kind of an outlet that is credible. Something like MUFON or Bufon in the UK, I guess, would be
Yeah.
a kind of a legitimate outlet to go and find stuff. But it's hard to
Mm.
say. There's plenty of accounts and news outlets and stuff get stung by stuff that turns out to be fake or get debunked because it's such a
Yeah.
mysterious subject that no one's really got any of the
Hmm.
answers. So if you're able to find one platform that posts nothing but confirmed non-human craft will all be there.
Yeah.
Will all or
Yeah. Yeah.
information that nobody else has got from the next whistleblower, then I'll be all over it. So yeah, long
Mm.
answer to I look everywhere and people send me stuff.
Good one though. Good one though. So here's a here's a big question. And this is kind of presuming that there is a they, as if the same way that people say the government, as if it's like one room full of people. Why are they here?
Why are they here? I don't know.
Mm.
I think probably because they have always been here, and the question is probably why are we here? That would be my closest kind of guess.
Ooh.
Mm,
Ooh, zinger.
yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So would you say it was let's turn it to like, do you think it's positive intent? Do you think it's negative intent? Or do you think it's something that a human couldn't understand?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it's I think we just don't understand it. I think the concept of positive or negative is something that we've created, and that actually that doesn't
Hmm.
really exist in that thing, that that world.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the most likely outcome, is that we just don't understand it, and that doesn't really have a good or bad or good or evil. It just has a them.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Interesting. So there's a bit of an interesting one. Interested to hear your thoughts about the recent dark side of UFOs that we've been hearing about. Now, I think that we is a bit of a subjective one. Like, it's hard to say what that dark side might be, but like, for every Chris Bledsoe, you get a Travis Walton, and every inspiration there's like a traumatization as well. So, what do you think? What do you think all that's about?
Yeah, I mean it's probably the Lou Elizondo thing, isn't it? There's been sort of reposted a fair bit recently, which is, what if they're not kind, positive, and what if you
Mm,
found out something that will change your worldview and have a negative
mm,
impact? And there's a few other people that have said similar things, and I guess that's probably what the question they're asking. And I guess that's just a what if abduction is real and that's happened, and coming to terms with that. What if we're not at the top of the food chain and that's true, and we have to come to terms
mm.
with that? And what if we're in a fishbowl and we're being harvested for our souls, which is I think uh, I think Gary Nolan's kind of made some comments about that potentially being a thing. So I don't know. I mean, we'd have to understand what the person asked that question meant entirely. But I guess
Yeah.
it's the what if this is going to be really bad for us in a layman's terms. What if what
Mm,
we find out is really bad and it changes things? And I've had a few people come to me um, behind the scenes and say, "Look, this I don't know if I want to know this stuff, and this is going to be bad for my 401k, or in the UK your pension. This is going to be bad for my kids and
mm.
my family, and we've got a life, and I don't want any change to that." And people don't like change. Who
No,
does? So it's the fear of the unknown, but the unknown being really powerful. And
inevitable.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I liken it to death. Ultimately, if we're going to die, that's the ultimate unknown, isn't it? You don't know what happens
Yeah,
when that point comes and you punch out. You don't know what happens. You don't know where you go. If you're going to see your family again. So it's not really different from that, really, because if the worst case
absolutely.
scenario is death, then what could it be that's worse than that? You know.
Mm.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm guessing it's we're not the top of the food chain, kind of an answer.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think the last one then, because most of the others we've kind of answered as an aside. How have your conclusions changed in season one and meeting these guests and kind of pursuing it and speaking to different people? What's kind of how have you gone from your starting point to where you are now?
I think that I'd always believed that there was something. And
Hmm.
I guess what changed was that I saw the people that had witness testimony were people, kind of military people that you saw in
Hmm.
documentaries, and a few kind of people out in some farm out in the sticks in Ohio, or wherever.
Hmm.
And but the majority of the time they were on these big kind of glossy, ancient alien type programs, History Channel, and they didn't seem like real people. I kind of knew they probably were, but I
Yeah.
thought, well, there's probably a
Mm,
financial element. They're telling their story. A little skeptical because they're probably being paid to be on the show. They're a bit too
mm,
polished, and I'd never really spoken to anybody that I knew was credible because I knew them or because I could look at
hmm
them in the eyes. And then I kind of went on this journey and I spoke to several people who I'm certain didn't lie to me. And
mm,
that changed things. I thought, okay, these people did see and experience these things. I've got no doubt in my mind. They're not getting paid. I'm not
mm,
giving them any money. And
mm,
they benefit in no way from telling me this information. If anything, it's the stigma. They're going on the podcast. They're the ones saying the stuff, and people are going to see that. And so that kind of, that's probably the best way to describe the kind of change. Really, is that I realised that these sightings are vast, and they're not just a few people that have made it on the telly. They're at least one person in every family, one person in every workplace, if not more, have had an experience
mm,
one way or another. Some more kind of extraordinary than the others, but certainly it's certainly
mm,
more prevalent than we perhaps realise.
mm. Great answer, man.
Yeah.
Great answer. Well, I think that pretty much covers
Well, let me
everybody's
ask.
stuff.
Let me before we come to an end. Let me ask you a couple of little questions. And I kind of chucked a few in as we were talking there.
Yeah.
But what my first question I ask every podcast guest: what first piqued your interest in the UFO UAP subject? I'd quite like to know.
It's a long answer, mate, and I'm aware we've been going for a couple hours, so I won't chew your arm off with it. But so about 20 years ago, my mum, who had been a very normal business lady, your average mum, she had the same thing that Nick Cook's wife had, which was what they call a shared death experience with my grandparents as they went, and it triggered a psychic ability in her. She's now 20 odd years later a psychic medium. So my worldview was rocked at that point. So I was a massive skeptic of it, even when Mum was doing it, because it developed and grew and became a thing. And then I, through interactions with her and seeing testimony from people that had been to her for readings and stuff like that, just had it fundamentally proven to me. Like, people were getting messages of look under this piece of furniture, and then they will do that and they'll find their granddad's old service badge and stuff like that. So it's like there was so many of these things where I was like, oh my God, like the world is not what I've been taught. And then I've always been interested in planes. I've been a big nerd. So I've always been interested in cutting edge like projects and like all these sneaky, blurry glimpses of stealth fighters over the Gulf and stuff like that. So over lockdown, really, I just thought like we started seeing David Fravor and whatnot. And that was my sort of start down the rabbit hole of like, oh, what's going on? Is this secret? Is this some next generation plane that's going to come out, or is this Marvin the Martian, or whatever? And it's only kind of recently that's developed into the whole kind of spiritual side being a part of the phenomenon as well. But that's how it started for sure. Yeah.
And one last question, hopefully it'll be an easy one for
Yeah.
you, slightly easier perhaps, because it's who would, I think I know the answer. Who would, who would be your perfect podcast guest? Who would you like to have a podcast with? Or
Ooh,
can you think of a couple, maybe a couple that jump to mind?
I can. So I think that people like Chris Bledsoe, obviously, and his son, are they're kind of like overlooked. But if you
Mm.
actually listen to what their account is, again, just like you said, they've got no motivation to lie. The people that have been around them are insane. Like every name we can pull out of a hat that's been on these podcasts has been and studied with him. But then there's other people that do fantastic stuff, like Jeffrey Mishlove, a gent called Russell Targ. Now, I am going to throw in just as a last poke, one of Mick West's like go-to beatdowns is that the Stargate program was a complete failure, for example, whereas actually it was a massive success. They bought silver on the stock market with a 70% success rate. They found a crashed plane in the jungle. They found a Russian new prototype sub being built. So like, and they kept it going from, I think, late 60s up until the 90s, I think, when it was canned. So, you know, find me something else that can have traction for 30 years before people decide it's a bad idea. So I think where the stigma is thickest at the moment is with this kind of consciousness idea, because I think that's something that is really uncomfortable for people to realize, you know, and obviously it kind of butts heads with lots of accepted concepts of religion and how the world works. So I think those people need a bit more of a voice in this conversation, because just like John Ramirez says, accept everything, but just hold it lightly. So even if you've got no interest in that, you might just, you know, it might just creep along your personal journey of what this is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody watch this space and see what comes in 2024. Let's try and get some of those people on. I think I'm
Happy
conscious
New Year for in like 3 hours, everyone.
Yeah. Happy New Year. 2024, crazy year. What a crazy year it's been.
Boom.
Jesus. Right.
It's been wacky, isn't it?
Well, look, I've got my New Year's Eve mince pie. I think
nice.
I think it's probably a good time to call it a wrap. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, man.
I've really enjoyed this.
Absolutely.
Mate.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to get on here and have a chat with you, man. I've really enjoyed it. Whether or not this was a podcast or just a phone conversation, I would have enjoyed it. But yeah, it's really good. And it's great to be a part of particularly your channel, because I think you're doing a great job.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you being part of it. I really do. And hopefully we'll work a lot more together in the future. And, you know, I'd love to do some more podcasts with you. And I'm always, you know, really appreciative of all of your advice and stuff when I've got an idea and I run it past you, and you're always great with that. Keep me on track as well. I like it. So thanks very much. We'll call it a night there, I think. Thanks everyone for listening. If you've got to, I think 2 hours in, we've done pretty well. It's probably our longest ever podcast. Nice. I'm going to try and get this out by 9. Oh,
I think you'll have a job, but good luck.
All right. Take care. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. And
cheers, buddy. Bye.
Cheers, bye. Cheers, dude.